So first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm guessing some of you at least got the email that Andy Hubley had a sort of a last-minute schedule conflict, which didn't allow him to be here today. Rather than push the meeting out for a date that worked for him, since everyone already had it on our calendars, we just we're going ahead with this meeting, and I'm going to pinch hit. But I'm hoping that everybody feels like we've all spent a lot of time together in this group, and I'm hoping that everybody feels like this is your group and your meeting, and we can all sort of try to keep ourselves accountable to the idea of actually continuing this process moving forward. So thank you in advance for that. And let's see, food. You've got the food. We do have pie. We're gonna, since I got to make the agenda this time, the pie is number 4. There's a lot of work before that. So we'll have a little pie transition a little later. We are sitting in the same type of groups we did last time by area. So the county's here, Grand Portage back here, the city's here. If you don't work, for the county or the city or Grand Portage, then pick which entity you feel like you. I guess that only applies to you, Gwen.
Yep.
Pick where you want to pick.
No, I should.
All right. So that's the welcome back.
Yeah.
At the last meeting in April, we started talking more specifically about by entity or by area, what type of things that each group felt like were important to us. We feel that we completed some ideas under some headings, if you remember those. There was like public input, infrastructure projects, policy, those type of ideas, and we kind of started to fill in by area what we were interested in. And that was a great brainstorming session. We have those notes and we'll give them out to you to refer back to in a few minutes. The county's right here, if you guys want to join up with them. City's over here, Grand Portage. So today we're really just, we're continuing that same idea that we started last week, but today we're doing it, we're kind of trying to hone in, we started out here and we're trying to kind of hone in a little bit about what do we actually want to do and what are we actually willing to work on, because there's, a million ideas and we probably only can agree on a few of them. So that's really the bulk of the meeting. I'm calling it rapid fire action planning because we're going to take about 30 or 40 minutes, so it's going to be pretty succinct. And so we'll get to that in just a minute here. We'll have pie as a reward for your hard labors. And then at the end of the meeting, we're going to talk about what's the common goal or the shared interest of this group, because we're breaking out by our areas, but is there a common goal or a shared interest? And if so, what is that? And so we'll do a little brainstorming about that. And then we need to talk about future meetings, because clearly Andy isn't here today. I don't think of the people I've talked to ahead of this meeting, I think it hasn't been all of you, but I think there's a consensus that we're not done. We're not really at a stopping point, but we also, up front, we also asked 5 meetings of you, and this is meeting number 5. So as a group, we need to discuss where people want to go with that, on that topic. So that's the agenda in a nutshell. Does anybody have any comments, questions, burning things on your mind that need to be stated? Okay, so hearing none, we're going to jump to the action planning. So here's the idea. The idea is in your groups, what do you actually plan to work on coming out of this? Some of this may be things you already have identified in other realms, but it relates to active living. Some of it may be new ideas that came out of this group. It could be something that really hasn't come up yet. That would be kind of last minute to throw something in, but that's certainly a possibility. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, I have some papers to help guide you. And this is what we're looking at. Everybody will get one of these little papers, actually a couple of them. And maybe I'll hand them out and then I'll tell you what it says. So you'll need to decide who wants to write, and on those papers. So every group, we'd like you to try to hone in a little bit further on what we've talked about in the past months. So related to work that we may do, goals that we may have that supports active living. And we do have, every table or every group has a definition of active living, we've been kind of stating that every month the last few months. So as a reminder, active living is a way of life in which people are physically active during their daily routines. It means walking or bicycling to work, school, or to go shopping. It also means exercising, playing in the park, taking the stairs, and going to recreation facilities. Active living is influenced by policies, infrastructure, education, and enforcement.
What's enforcement?
That would be LEAF. Or that would also be, no.
Concerned with you? I don't think so.
So this definition is not exclusive. It doesn't mean if it's not listed on here, it's not active living. But this gives you the idea of what the definition, the broad definition of active living is. Okay, so your little action plans here. Just want to tell you this is written on here, but so everybody hears it. I think we all understand that what we write down today are ideas. They only represent those of us that are here today. Most of you work for boards of one type or another, and certainly what's put down on paper here, probably most of it could not proceed without a department head or a board authorizing that. So I think we all know that. I'm asking everyone to sort of accept that's a assumption that we're all operating on. So what's put down on here does in no way mandate or supersede the authority of the city council, the reservation tribal council, or the county board. But it is information that represents your groups, the conversations we've had here, and where you would like to see things move forward. And then, of course, it would have to go to the next levels of authority, in the future before it would ever become an actual plan that you were, planning to actually implement. And again, we're only really, we can only speak to who's here, our ideas, the ideas that we may have heard from others, but ultimately that's what we're doing is we're talking about who's here today, what are your ideas and thoughts, where do you see there's an opportunity to move this work forward to support the option for people to safely walk or bike or whatever you choose in your groups as important goals. Any questions about that part? Okay, so this is what's on your paper here. What's your big picture or long-term goal? You may have more than one. Hopefully you have one. But you may have none, you may have three, and it will look different for every group. I'm going to just use the county as an example. We have commissioners here, we have law enforcement here, we have highway department here, we've got citizens, public health, administration. So it may be that you all decide on one goal, or it may be that you break out in different ways and have different goals that are more relevant to different departments. So that's really up for each group to decide amongst yourselves. All right, so you've got your big picture goal, then we're kind of stepping back from there. So if you're working on this big goal, maybe a policy, it may not be. It's up to you. So then backing out from there, what are you going to do to achieve that a year from now? How are we going to be closer to that goal? 6 months from now, how are we going to be closer to that goal? And in the next month, actually, what could you do to be a little closer to that goal? So that's the framework, and then for each one of those questions, we're also asking you to assign who might be the responsible party for that step, and then also who else do you need input from, because we know we don't represent everyone. So who else for each of those steps would you need to have input from or help from? It may be citizens, it may be others, it may be an agency like MnDOT, or it may be something completely different. All right, so that's the idea of the action plan. Any questions on that part specifically? This is why I did this in the beginning while you're all chewing. I'm just kidding. Totally joking. Okay, there's also one other piece of paper in that stack, that short stack I gave you, and this is to just jot down, what goes into your plan. That's your top priorities. That's the things that you feel are probably achievable. But there are other ideas that are going to be really important that you may not want to lose. And so then there's this piece of paper that's something that maybe didn't make it onto the plan, but it's something that's important to your group or to you as an individual. Jot it down, and these are things that that we can look to the community, to other stakeholder groups, and we can just keep on the back burner of ideas we don't want to lose. If opportunities should arise that would address one of these things, we can pursue them. That's what this paper that looks like this is for. Okay. So, ready, set, go. Oh, I'll just also mention that Brian Anderson is here from MnDOT, District 1 Planner for MnDOT. Thanks again for being here. And he'll float around the different groups. If you have something that's relevant to MnDOT, a MnDOT issue, or you need MnDOT as a resource, he'll be moving around the group. 30 minutes. Okay, do we have I hate to cut everybody off because I know there's really good conversation going. And it's still going. And going further.
Go ahead, come on.
All right. Why don't we start with the county since Joni's up here? So for the purposes of reporting out, I heard this from several groups that you wrote everything on the little paper and you didn't want to write it again on the big one. So message received. If you didn't write any notes or you paraphrased or whatever, feel free to read off. Would you guys mind? Thank you. So if you prefer to read what you wrote on your sheet, if that's more clear and more what the group actually decided upon, please feel free to do that. This was just to give people a visual way to see, if you can even see from over there, to see what was discussed. So from bouncing around the room, it sounded like a really good conversation. I apologize, we don't have more time to keep going, but let's hear what you did come to, and then we'll have pie. Take it away, Heidi.
Big picture, we started with the county should provide the resources that allow those who want to be active to be able to do that, which moved to the short term of create policy and practice that supports healthy living, making the healthy choice an easy choice. And it's odd to go year, 6 month, and next month, so I'm going to start from the bottom, sorry. From this group, we need to create a plan to bring to the county board to create a trails task force. And I know trails sounds like one thing, but what we mean by that is all of these groups that are spinning their wheels. We have the bicycle associations, the trail runners, the path runner. I mean, there's like 10 associations doing the same thing in all different parts of the county, and each of them come to the county board one at a time asking for something. So if we get a task force together, that's the umbrella for all of them and says, okay, what do we need to do for everybody? And work on that together instead of them one at a time coming to the board. So then what the county board will need to do is to get department heads together to decide how we're going to create that task force and who should be involved in that task force. And the county heads we want involved is Diane here because she deals with the tennis association, the softball association, the hockey association, which is part of this but separate from this, but she needs to be a part of the discussion. We also need planning and zoning because decisions that we make, that they make, involve planning and zoning and what we can or can't do. The highway department, if we have anyone crossing our roads and in any of our easements. Law enforcement, because they're gonna have to enforce whatever we encourage. And then I put GIS on there because they're working on trail markers and everything like that right now, so we need to all get together. And so this is our big picture plan.
Any questions on that or anything else?
Could you restate the goal for me? I'm sorry, Heidi.
The goal is to create policy and practice that supports healthy living, making the healthy choice an easier choice.
Thank you.
So you took the recreation angle. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Did Heidi sum it up pretty well for the group? Questions on the county side?
Do you envision the county owning some of these trails? Do you own trails now? Do you own trails? Or is this just talking about trying to incorporate systems that are already out there?
Incorporate systems, we don't want to own them, we don't want to take them over, we don't want to be responsible for them. But it's got to be hard for all of these groups out there and individuals, and some of them don't even know that they can come to the board and ask for something. They may or may not know there's grants available or funding available, and so we need to be more proactive.
Sometimes groups are looking for grants and they need local government support or someone to accept the fiscal responsibility of the grant. Sometimes it's as simple as a map, which involves GIS. And you know, I don't know if it was, but in the past, GIS has not done any mapping for anything other than county needs. So you've got trails running and they can't even suggest building a new trail because they can't get something laid out. They don't have the means. So I think there's a lot of, by taking this, the county takes a little bit of ownership of the group, not of the trails, but ownership of the group, which is trying to provide for connectability, for multi-use, to bring all this whole umbrella of things together. And I don't know that all, it might be more than one group. It might wind up being 2 or 3 different task force based out of that. I mean, that's not to umbrella everything. It might be too huge to even be workable.
So just to help everybody understand too, are you thinking that this is sort of what you as a group today would like to continue to move forward on? Was there anything else that came up on the other sheet of paper, ideas that you don't want to lose? Anything else that didn't make it on here that we should be
we talked
sharing?
about as different departments are working on projects that we would look at creating some type of a checklist of healthy living principles for planning and zoning and highway and all of our different departments to look at as they're moving forward with projects that might embrace active living philosophy and for them to consider as they're creating their projects.
Sort of an interdisciplinary
Yeah, and
idea.
Russ talked about Itasca County or others, maybe even within departments already having some things we can work off of.
Great.
We also talked about, this might be outside of this group, but just even in communication as we put agendas together for the public to be really clear about those topics that are being presented so that citizens understand and can participate more easily if it's a topic that interests them or particular groups. As an ancillary. We went down that. We had plenty of focus on just that forming that group.
Yeah, that looks great. Thank you. Grand Portage.
As you can see by our paper, mine, everything is perfect. We kind of started out, kind of refreshed the group. Before we were invited to this committee, we had a biking, walking trail started and then funded and planned. So our first kind of step is to complete that. But here's our big picture goal goes like this. You ready, Mark?
Yep. Thank you. Here's our
Plan and fund the second phase of our trail project and other projects that promote healthy living and an active lifestyle in the Grand Portage community. And in the next year, we'd like to just, I guess part of that right there is continue to plan and find funding for the second phase of this trail, which we think there's only gonna be 2 phases, but we might keep her going, we don't know. And also in the next year, we're gonna facilitate a community forum for community interests on active living, just have a public meeting group to get other ideas other than, we do also have a wellness committee in Grand Portage that meets monthly, so over and above and beyond that, involve the community. And in the next 6 months, again, we're going to complete the phase this summer. We're going to get the first part of that trail project done. It's the first phase runs from, if you're familiar with Grand Portage, runs from what's called staff housing or Picnic Bay to the casino and C-store, that kind of through along the road there. So that'll get done in the next 6 months. And we're very close. We're in the process of getting radar speed control signs in front of our charter school and community center up in Jen. So we just about got the money secured for that, and Kristen helped us out with that. Kristen was up and seen us a couple of weeks ago, and that's real close. We're gonna have that done hopefully in the next 2 months instead of the next 6 months. That's a big. We're whipped up about that. That's exciting. And in the next month, we have a community cleanup day planned. On May 9th, we involve the students from both IDS and our charter school. We go take them out and we clean up all the roads in the community. And then we also put in for some more Kristen's money. I forgot what it's called.
Moving matters.
Yeah. No, that's not what it's called. You had no money. The Great Race Plays.
Great.
So Paula got that together, we got it together. Paula did most of the work, I'll give her the credit. So we're gonna try to put together a sports equipment bank to have at our community center, balls, gloves, bats, so that the kids can go check out and use and then check back in. And also we're gonna try to get a better storage facility for stuff like this, our horseshoe pits and things like that. So that's where we're at.
Nice.
Great. Does anyone else from your,
Can I just ask one quick? Just so everyone knows, we had 27 applications for the Great Place Race, totally over $20,000 of requests.
How much money is there?
We were now trying to consider $5,000. We're hoping to make a little bit of money around as possible, but we had $4,500 that was committed to it. But no matter what, it was, I know the committee meeting soon, we'll let them know who the winners are, but this community is amazing.
every corner of the county, there were applications.
Very good.
Does anyone from Grand Portage Group have anything to add? Did you have any other ideas that didn't make it onto your action plan that you still didn't want to lose sight of?
You didn't give us enough time for that.
Great. Does anyone have questions?
Just a comment that I'm really glad that you guys reminded all of us that Kristen has money, and that we can be looking at her as a resource as we're putting things on the board here.
It's not that much money. But it never hurts to ask.
That's right.
And more than anything, we're just a conduit for making these things happen when there is a group or citizens that are wanting it to happen. So, okay. City of Grand Marais. What you got?
Somehow somebody managed to write what I wrote poorly on paper. So we have a big picture. People feel encouraged to actively engage in the community by welcoming pedestrian-friendly or oriented design policies and places. Now, our goal is we want to deal with Highway 61 as it exists in downtown Grand Marais. So in the next month, we're going to move it in May. I'm going to just work on other projects for a while, I think, in the next month. Probably won't get back to this one. We're really excited about this.
I'm just going to move it.
Yeah, this is the next month, or the next 30 days. But we're really excited about what's going to happen in the next 6 months, the next 12 months. We're working right now with a landscape architect and civil engineers, and we want to conduct this public design process for Highway 61. So we want to incorporate a lot of those ideas that I think have come up in these meetings in the past, that we need to involve the public more in our infrastructure planning, and we need to make sure that the trained professionals are incorporated into it as necessary as well. And so we've got a good team of people that have worked with MnDOT in the past, that MnDOT knows and respects, that's going to help us go through our design process and come up with some solutions to this. What do we need to do differently for Highway 61 so that it does this in our big picture? And we're going to get that done in the next 6 months. In the next 12 months, we're going to do that, but we're also going to take it to the next step. Brian's already been helping us identify funding sources. But what we want to do is take that design and make it happen. So in the next 12 months, we're going to actually make some applications for funding assistance to help do this project. Some of the things that Brian's talked about, he says the money could be here in the next 2 years even. And so a project like this, which seems like it'll always take forever, and yet if we show some initiative locally, get together and put a design together with some public input, with some professionals that MnDOT knows and respects, that there might be a way for us to actually get something done in a couple of years rather than the next 10. So we're really excited about that. That's our big picture goal and our action plan. We did also have a couple of things that we wanted to make sure weren't forgotten. We need a new public involvement in our capital improvement plan process. We've talked about that. It seems like that is necessary based on a lot of conversations we've had here and other things that have happened. So we don't want to forget about that. We're going to redesign how we do our capital improvement plan. We need a list of design criteria for incorporating active living into our projects. Sounds like you want one too.
Yeah.
And other people have already done this, and MnDOT's going to help a little bit too. So that sounds great. We'll need to keep in touch on that. Maybe we'll have some of the same ideas. And we want to develop a pedestrian connectivity, sidewalk connectivity plan. We've talked about that a lot in the city, but we really need to revisit it, make sure it still makes sense, make sure we like what it says, and then prepare it professionally so that we can communicate what it says better. That's what we don't want to forget.
Great. Anyone from the city group have anything you'd like to add to what Mike shared? No. Anything else hanging out there that must be said before pie?
Just a question for the city with your safe crossing on Highway 61. Are you looking at orange flags as part of that initiative?
There are there.
To be added to the new safe crossing areas as well?
Well, one thing I said in our discussion was we don't need to do the design here today.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just want to make sure that we've identified the problem and we've talked about what process we're going to use to get some solutions. I don't know what they'll be.
Okay.
You advocate for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Just do it, Joni.
Yeah. We don't need to wait 6 months for that.
Great.
When it comes, we got into the side conversation in the end, you know, you had your statement what active living is, and at the very bottom, active living is influenced by policies, infrastructure, education, and enforcement. And several of us had issues with enforcement, thought that really should need to be changed. I gave the impression, you know, you go with someone, an individual with a heavy stick. And I know they've had concern that people might connect that with, too much government influence, with Agenda 21 being brought up by a couple individuals. But maybe, words that might convey something like, encouragement, accountability, voluntary behavior, something like that, but not enforcement.
Sure.
Maybe it would be helpful to give some examples of what you mean by enforcement in a real world setting, so that it's not so scary. One that comes to mind for me is if somebody's going 30 miles an hour in front of the school rather than 20 miles an hour, maybe they need to get a warning or a ticket. That's the kind of enforcement that supports the policies that the county's already put in place for active living. Or if someone doesn't stop for a pedestrian in a crosswalk, even though we've signed it and painted it and educated it, maybe there needs to be a warning or a ticket for that. So I think there's still a place for enforcement. It doesn't have to be the focus of what we're going to plan on all the time, but there needs to be a place for it.
And that's what we talked about. I think even, you know, in Leaf agreeing that enforcement is done without it being on that paper. Enforcement is automatically involved because if there's a speed limit, there's a speed limit. Enforcement is involved. Without using that, because if just one word could be a detriment to a lot of people on the outside looking at this and going, enforcement, because that was my first question.
I took it as enforcement of the, you know,
People
not
active.
enforcement of
Yeah,
the
right.
policies and so forth.
Well,
I think
I
it's-
think those are really important points, and especially when you're talking about the public perception of this type of thing, because active living isn't a new idea, but the term is newish, and it's unfamiliar, and so it leads people to question, which is natural. That definition is a standard definition. You search it on the internet, that's what you'll find. So it's hard to change a definition. I think if the county's interested in fleshing that out a little bit more, what it means to you or the city or any group, then it would be really important to spell those things out, give examples of what it means to you, or change it up. But there's no doubt that active living is influenced by enforcement and those other things. But what matters isn't that it's influenced or not. What matters is how you interpret that, and whether you decide enforcement is something you want to pursue or not, or whether you feel like what you're already doing is adequate. Enforcement is not, you know, a real flashy or appealing way to go most of the time, you know, unless you're talking about safety, which on occasion is what we're talking about here. So I think that was such a great thing to bring up, because the public perception of all this is really critical. And now we're gonna have pie. So you've got 5 minutes to get pie. While you're going to get your pie, think about what we just talked about and what strings it all together. Why should we, or what's the value of us all talking about this together in a room versus just doing it within our own entities and buildings? So, pie. Pie. So, it's a lot less fun facilitating the meeting than it is attending it. But I want to thank you all for quieting down and that sort of thing, being well behaved. Appreciate it. So now we're going to try to answer some questions. There isn't a right answer. There isn't one answer. There's no doubt about that. This is really more of a brainstorming. If we do come to some consensus, I'd be very surprised, but that would be wonderful. But we're going to try to start moving in that direction. And the idea is we've had a phenomenal attendance at these meetings. This is number 5. From people that don't usually sit in the same room together for 2 hours a month. And I want to thank you all for that. I don't know exactly what has motivated each of you to be here, but clearly something has. And so I feel like there must be some shared interest amongst all of us here, something that makes it worthwhile for you to come besides just the food, although that was intended to be a hook. So let's talk about that. And maybe we can go sort of around by the different groups, but this is informal, throw it out. I'm just going to write stuff up on the paper here and help me make sure I get it phrased the way you want it. So what's really our common interest? Where do we need each other to work together to achieve some of these safety goals, some of these supportive ways to, the idea of making it easy to make the healthy choice or make that an easier option. And let's start with that. Let's start with the common goals or interests. We're going to have about 10 minutes on that, and then we'll talk about 10 minutes of what's the role of this committee. So I'm going to put the city on the spot. What do you see, different group members here that are here today? What do you see as our common goals, shared interests? What do you need from the other folks that are here?
Well, what we just talked about were the things that we needed from each other. In the city, we have many county roads, so we need county involvement in our plan. And we talked about needing to be further inspired by Grand Portage and all that they have that support wellness. It just was amazing to hear that you have a wellness person on staff. I just think that's awesome. So I can see that there'd be a lot of, I think just even in creating our why, we were greatly inspired by your rec center. Yeah, so I just think that there's a common desire.
Open dialogue. Talk
Yeah.
about like keeping an open dialogue and the communication channels open, so we're not, missing important opinions and angles that it's a no start. Let's move on.
What did you say to hear important?
Just the ideas and the topics of interest are shared.
And
Yeah, plans.
Brian, do you have a different role in this, but
Yeah, it's slightly different role, but to hear those interests and those needs and to have access to the resources is kind of, in order to spend those resources, we as an agency need to know what the community wants. So, it's just a simple conversation we had here at the Grand Marais is really looking at needing a pedestrian plan, kind of more or less melding that plan together a little bit more, maybe get some GIS associated with that. And we as an agency have a contract with ARDC to do planning assistance in the region that we can totally build that into. It's just a matter of hearing that need and making a phone call and go back.
so it sounds like some of the relationship, like open communication channel.
I also think that Brian just said access to resources, and I think knowing what those resources are and knowing that we have the ability to access them is important.
Knowing what the resources are and how to access. Glenn, would you add anything? Did you speak?
I like that.
County.
Well, I had something, quite in line with the last one, knowing resources, always being on top of grant opportunities. We have, a couple, over the years, but always being on top of grant opportunities. In particular, of those grants, for sidewalks or walking, biking trails.
Historically, 4 of our main groups have come together quarterly to discuss common projects or just what's going on, and city, school, Grand Portage, and the county have come together, and I'm wondering if we might not think about adding active living as an agenda item to that committee as a means for updating what's going on with what we have on the board and maybe focusing on some common areas where we still would like to go forward. The example of the checklist idea that we talked about here as a county, and then Mike, you mentioned it as well, just as an example that there might be some kind of a guiding principle or other that is created that we all use.
We also talked about expanding that committee. That's been brought up here numerous times. I think we need to include the hospital. Hospital clinic.
And I know that committee has been very active for some years and then probably has not been real active for a while. And so just looking at, maybe what the purpose of that committee is and where they want to go forward.
Which committee was that?
That's the quarterly county.
Oh, this one up here.
Right, yeah.
So I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Heidi, did you mean adding the hospital to this group?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we should have MidDoc come to that meeting too.
Last time the city hosted that meeting, which I don't remember how long ago.
A long time.
Probably a while ago.
Did you have Pike?
No, but we did have Kristen. We were talking about the Blue Cross grant, before it was live, and it was just the perfect topic for that group, because everybody
Awesome.
involved.
So that was a while ago.
That's true, but my recollection is that there were very few people in attendance.
Yeah, but look what happened here.
Because we lost our meeting.
Right, that's
No, we
part of what I
didn't.
talked to Joni about, was that meeting was how long ago, and I told her that Kristen was there, and I said, part of what's going on was that meeting, we didn't have an agenda ahead of time. It was kind of, this is our normal thing, this is when we're meeting. And I think that a lot of people to drive from Grand Portage to that meeting really want to know what they're driving there for. And so, Mike, do you know who facilitates it? Because I don't even know.
Okay.
Is it-
So there was a little email that went out just fairly recently. Here's the update on that group. I think there were a couple of people who have since retired, and new, right? So
Yes.
I'm trying to understand this rhythm or cycle if there is one, but there were a couple key people who sort of set up reminders that retired. One was from the school district and one was from our office. And Beth Schultz fairly recently said, hey, what happened to our meetings? And I actually just sent out an email. Our next one would be in May, and I haven't gotten any responses back. I'm looking at the school district, and it was, I think your tribal chair was on the list too. There might be other people that we have to reach out to, but that's where that is today.
Yeah, good to know.
Other ideas from your group? Anybody want to add anything? Where do we need each other? What are the common goals that are broader than just your departments or the county?
We need each other every day. We cannot do this as our own silos.
I think it would be a better understanding of each of our roles. In all honesty, one of the reasons the highway department is here is to keep our hands from getting tied any more than they are. And that's on both the funding and the planning side. We just finished putting together our transportation improvement plan for the next 5 years, but the next cycle. And going through it, we've got over $27 million of projects that need to be done today, short term, that aren't funded at all. Let's not count the next 5 years of projects we have planned and funded. We don't have the money. We typically basically have 3 sources of funding. We have state aid funds that are from state fuel taxes. We get roughly $1.2 million a year from that. We have federal funding, which comes from federal fuel tax or other grants. And in general, looking back and looking forward, it's about $500,000 every 5 years that we're going to see in federal funding. Sometimes we see extra here or there, but that's about what we got. The only other one we have is local property taxes. Those are the only other funding source we have. And obviously that comes from just the property owners in the county. And that's the one we're most sensitive to because we're going to get response back as quickly if that changes the amount that we're going to be taking there. With that, we have to maintain all of the roads in the whole county. The state aid funding we can only use on state aid highways. Basically, the county roads numbers 1 through 23 are state aid. Everything beyond that is not, and we can't use state aid funds on it. Nor can we use federal funds on it. Now we're back to local funds only and those property taxes. So, we finished up that plan. Roughly, we're redoing the paving on about 4.5 miles of road every year. That's what we average over the next 5 years. State aid alone, we've got about 125 miles of paved road. So if you do the math, that's about 30 years to just replace pavement. Asphalt's about a 20-year project. So you can see the battle we're fighting. So that's part of the reason we're here, is because any funds that drain off to do other things have to come off of road projects. And so we want that. That's not to say we're against sidewalks, against bike trails, against active living, against incorporating those into the designs of our projects as we do them. It's just that part of our job here is to make known this is what we're facing, and everybody in every other, county, the sheriff's department, the city, their departments, Parks and Rec and everything else are all facing the same issues. So it's it's the idea of we need to each know where everybody else is coming from, so we don't have these unrealistic expectations of what, well, they've got the money, they can do it, or well, they're gonna do a project so they can do it. Type of deal. It's what can they really do? What kind of resources do they have? And so I think that's part of what this group needs to do, is be able to pass that around. And so that everybody knows where they're coming from, and everybody's kind of on the same page for funding that.
And I think it is policy of the highway department, I think that's an important part of it, that whenever we are doing anything in the municipalities, we automatically look at sidewalks or sidewalk improvements. When we're doing rural roads, we're looking at wide shoulders. We love wider lane widths, and we love wider shoulders, and we love lanes that can move people safely. It doesn't always happen that way, and it ain't because we don't want it, it's because of restrictions and.
Yeah, and we've told the story before. We've got other restrictions that keep us from doing it, like the Gunfoot Trail project, where we wanted to put nice wide shoulders on it. We wanted to reconstruct it and widen it out, and so then we had places for biking and walking. We couldn't do it. There's federal rules and laws that wouldn't allow it. So we are, and that's again being able to pass that on to everybody and let you know where we're coming from too. So, and everybody's got their own issues. Grand Portage with their bike trail has a lot of issues they have to go sort out before they can do it. So it's just that mutual understanding.
I appreciate that, and I think that's so critical because you're right, everybody faces those budget issues, and they're unique. You know, the highway departments are unique to the work you do. The cities are unique to the work they do. Grand Portage, you know, we're all different in that way. But I think it's very true. I think everybody, like, raise your hand if you agree that there's less money than there is projects and needs that you have. No one's raising their hand. So,
I would just add that, are there mechanisms in place for public input and, you know, prioritization that, you know, gives people direction? I mean, this is kind of one of these things we come back to where who decides your plan, you know, the 5-year plan, and on what criteria?
Well, we put the draft together, and the next process is a public hearing.
So
It's a public hearing every year in front of the Board of Commissioners, and the public is invited to attend, and really, every year you're looking at, basically you're looking at year 5, because the 5-year plan is built up of 5 years, and you went through a year, so you're hopefully rolling the plan forward, so you're putting in year 5 again. Year 2 stepped up to year 1, and that's usually the way it isn't always, but that's the way you hope it goes.
And part of what is picked is worst road. I mean, it's not the richest neighborhood or the nicest people or the ones that complain the less. It's actual shape of the road is where it lands on the chart.
And importance of the road, I think.
Yeah. Amount of traffic.
Prioritization.
There's a lot that goes in it. Sometimes funding issues are part of the reason. Well, we're going to look at this part, you know, this project this year because of the type of funding we're getting. This project will be easier to fund. You know, there's some of those issues too.
and then it's really, my understanding of this is that then it goes to the, I mean, you get your public input, but then it goes to the board, and the board ultimately, like you say, is the citizen representation. And so it's interesting. I was talking to Dave Betts about this last week, and it was interesting for me to think about. I don't know the answer, but you know, we've got 2 commissioners here. Do you perceive your role, for example, in approving any budget? Do you perceive your role as active members, as passive in the sense that you're there to listen if people have a comment? Or do you perceive it as an active role where do you feel that it's your role to actually go out and solicit comment to find out what are the, you know, what do your constituents think about this budget or that budget or those sorts of things? And I don't expect you to answer that right now, but I just think it's an interesting, you know, it's true that the existing citizen input for the tip is that public hearing, and then people being able to contact their commissioners. So that's what we have now in that regard. You know, the city's talking about shifting or reevaluating how you would like to gather input. And that input thing is something that is being looked at throughout the region as far as, is it really adequate? If we really want input, is it adequate to present to the public with a pretty much finished plan and say respond? Or do we need to solicit input further or earlier in the process? And that's all messy, and it's all, you know, and it applies differently, I think, probably to different plans or budgets or, you know, that sort of thing. But that's, I mean, I want to be sure I capture what you're saying in the right way, Sam, because I think it's a really important point that we all, I think what I'm hearing you say is that we all face budget limitations and real needs, and that's important for this group to recognize that reality and share information about what each other faces so that we can talk about where there actually is room to work or to make changes and where there isn't.
And if I could, because I think this popped in my mind, but I think it's very relative, is grants sometimes come with matching funds, or the grant provides for this part of a project. And an example of that is the Durfee Creek project, in which that was a Lake Superior grant that provided for that crossing, and basically bought the footings and the culvert. Now, hold up, it's an excellent project, and we did a lot of road work. That project, the grant was like $65,000. The project cost $250,000. So while we were doing this $250,000 worth of work on this section of road, there's other roads that aren't getting attention, and it was influenced because of the $65,000 grant. So was that a priority for us? Maybe not necessarily, but it was great to get the grant money because, of course, the $65,000.
Well, somebody must have decided it was a priority because you did it.
We did it, but the grant was reflective of why it became a priority. The grant money made it the priority.
Yeah, and I think, and that is, I mean, that's a sticky thing, right? Because we can set our priorities, but when funding is available for different things, we have to be ready to jump.
Right.
And that's how we all operate. Bruce, go ahead, and then let's.
I have a question about past practices, and highway staff here being relatively new, we'll probably have to refer to the Mike. When the city take, improvements on Wisconsin or Broadway or going up to, 7 before the school, did the county come to the city earlier on in the process to get input on the designs, or did they wait till they had a final design in place, or what? What happened there?
The county wasn't involved in design from the least bit on Wisconsin and Broadway, which is probably a bad thing from both of our perspectives. The County Road 7 design, there wasn't a lot of conversation about how it's going to get implemented. Most of our conversation was about utility work that needed to be done, rather than what the top of the road was going to look like. And for the most part, we didn't necessarily need to be involved in that design, other than to say that we thought it was important to be a sidewalk, and that was shared by the county, and so we really didn't need to advocate for something there. The county was already trying to incorporate that into their design.
Grand Portage.
Just some things I was thinking about as I'm looking up there, and and really what all of us are looking for is ways to create a healthier community, healthier people in our community, which hopefully will create less healthcare costs, that kind of thing. And funding seems to be a huge issue with all of our groups. And so this is kind of going into the role of this group, but could we see maybe the role of this group is coming to be a unified voice to our policymakers, to our lawmakers, to address some of the funding issues that, you know, what happens with the highway department funding ultimately affects healthcare, and you know how that they're intertwined, and bring that message as a unified voice for the entire county to policymakers.
So a unified voice to policymakers. And how would you say it? Like, what's the nugget there of what are we advocating for? Where we have budget.
Well, a unified voice of policymakers that that promoting and creating active living or a healthy lifestyle.
We have 87 counties, and we need to make sure we're heard.
Right.
There are
Right.
people at the table, yeah. You know, when we go to the state and we bring forward the board, the city, and the hospital and clinic, it's a louder voice than just one of us.
So let's jump off this here for just a second. So we've got this group, it sounds like could be a unified voice to policymakers. And Heidi, you're saying at a state level. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
what
what
you were
I was
thinking,
talking
Paul.
about
Paul
also.
was thinking of.
Okay.
At the
And that's
state
what you were
level.
thinking as well.
Or federal level even.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me just complete this thought here so that we get it right. Promoting and creating healthy lifestyle has value, is important to us, needs more funding, has economic benefits.
All of that
All of
costs
those
money.
things, yeah.
It almost feels like taking the vision that we have on the wall and marketing it to those policymakers so that they can see the big picture of what our needs are, and that can be support, but it certainly can be financial.
Can be rule changes.
It
It can be rule
infrastructure, it can
changes.
be, yeah, policy, it can be funding, it can be
Yeah.
all of those things.
But right now, the state and federal people don't, I mean, they do somewhat know what our needs are, but we haven't invited them to the table.
So am I hearing like a meeting with, that we're inviting like Bach and Dill? Is that what you're thinking, or?
We could. Go
With
with
Amy Klobuchar, I mean,
If we could manage to create a unified voice, I don't think it would be difficult for us to use it.
Yeah.
It's much more difficult to decide what we're interested in sharing as our unified message.
Right.
Good point. Okay, Harris, you've had your hand up.
So we hear how we're struggling just to do the road maintenance, that should be done, and probably not able to do all that should be done. Sort of ends up being in competition with health matters. So just to sort of make this kind of a larger issue, it does call for reprioritization so that people that are struggling to get healthy lifestyle infrastructures in place are not in competition with folks that are struggling to maintain the present infrastructure we got. So, I mean, what I'm saying is that there needs to be a real reprioritization of state and national resources so that these conflicts aren't, there'll always be conflicts, but right now it seems like they're quite acute.
I think that's really clear. I think that's exactly, and I'm thinking of that from the standpoint of, if, as just an example, we go forward with a unified voice for whatever initiative of a healthy lifestyle, and all of a sudden it takes funding away from road and bridge, for example. We'd love to do roads with wider shoulders, which is what the group is looking for, but instead of that, we develop more policy that then creates more cost to paperwork. That's less road getting laid down. That's less product getting happening. And I think that needs to be clear is we promote these types of things without red tape. We want this to be streamlined. you know, it isn't that hard to understand as a group in here, but when it gets out there, then all of a sudden they gotta build a whole new department to do this, and then all of a sudden it just costs lots and lots of money to do that.
So to me, I feel like the underlying need, you know, just below what you're saying is that we need good communication and we need to trust and work together. And because if you, for example, Russ, if you felt like coming to this group, you were going to be attacked by somebody who wanted a bike lane right here, you know, then you're not really going to be able to have a real conversation about, you know, about what really the options are, what the situation is.
Right.
On the other hand, like if somebody, I don't know of anyone here, including myself, who wants a bike lane right in a certain location, but I'm using that as an example. If there was such a person, then coming to a group like this who didn't trust that somebody else was being forthcoming about, you know, what their limitations really were, then we're not really going to be able to get to that point. So can I put, I mean, do you think that's
I
like
think
trust or
somehow we're gonna get
communication?
that in there is that a community, well, for one thing, groups like this create communication in a diverse way, because if you just think the highway department has no money, or how, I mean, that's just using us or the sheriff's department, I mean, you can fill in any name you want on that. That's easy enough to say, but it's one thing to understand that there's policy that also goes with it that prevents things from happening. And sometimes that's not good. It should be able to streamline without. But there's reasons why it happened, and some of them don't even make sense or aren't even remembered. They didn't become part of it.
Bruce?
Sure. Personally, I do have a problem with, putting say active living, projects, pedestrian-friendly paths above, the required infrastructure work that I see needs to be done. We don't have the money, particularly, Pike Lake Road and on the Gunfront Trail near the top. But it might be easier for the local group, start, prioritizing active living, I don't know what verbiage would be, active living friendly projects. So we're ready when the grant opportunity comes. Oftentimes, it's a very limited window when you apply. I mean, the last CAP cycle, you actually literally had 1 month to submit your request of interest, and after that you couldn't, apply it. Once you submitted a request, if your intent to apply, sure, you had till February 5th or something to make the final application, but you have to be ready, and this group can prioritize, projects, so we're ready. There's another cycle coming up with 2019 CAP funding, and it's going to be this fall when you have to give your intent of the application. So you need to be ready.
Thank you.
Think about what Russ was saying, and what came to mind for me, you say, we need a bike path right here, is there's a real need for this group to help with the flexibility of problem solving. If somebody comes with a solution, they haven't figured out what the problem is that they're trying to solve. They don't really want a bike trail right here. They want to do something. They want to accomplish something, and that's what they've already decided the answer is. And maybe there are other ways to answer that we can help figure out. And conversely, when we've already decided what the design has to be, what are we accomplishing? And maybe there are different ways that we could do it too if we weren't thinking about what that person's need was and the way they can talk to us. There's just a real need for more flexibility in thinking about what the real problems are. And then when Bruce is talking about prioritizing, which I think is an outstanding idea, goes back to what you were saying, it really needs to be, how does this active living concept fit in with what we've already decided is important, we've already been doing, we've already budgeted, and we've already got programs in place for? If all this is a list of other things that we'll do when we get grants for it, then I think we're missing a boat. I think this has to be, we need to decide how important this is in comparison with all the stuff that we've already committed to. Where does it fit? It might mean that some of the things that we had already committed to get backed off of because they're not as important. It might mean this isn't as important as some of those other things, and we're not going to do some of these projects we thought. But there needs to be some way for us to think about that and go through that. I feel like we're getting closer to that, but that still hasn't been done. We really need to open up to that idea of prioritizing and try to incorporate these thoughts in it, put them where they belong.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the Grand Portage group? Be sure you guys get your time. Okay. Well, I feel like this is really good. I mean, this is important to start to have an understanding of what we share and what our role may be moving forward. I think we'll probably continue that idea next month. I don't know for sure because Andy will be back and he sets the agenda, but I'll certainly, share all this with him. He'll watch the video and he'll keep us moving.
So he is able to keep doing more meetings?
Well, let's talk about that. Andy, if we were going to meet in June, the first Thursday, which is what we have been meeting on, is June 5th. Andy is maybe available on June 5th. He's on vacation up the Gunflint Trail until through the 4th, so he wasn't quite sure if he could pull off being here or not. But the 5th, so we could meet the 5th. We could never meet again. We could meet the 5th. We could meet the 12th, or something else. So I guess it seems like the first Thursday has worked really well for people, but when we did have to shift to a different date last month, we also still had a really good turnout. So how important is the first Thursday of the month?
I do, for me personally, first week of the month, I'm most open. Nothing to the first week at the least number of commissioners meeting. But we have been kicking open the Thursday afternoon for work sessions, Tuesday afternoon for work sessions, but virtually any other day, first week, is doable.
Okay. So the issue in June then, I'm not hearing anyone say the first Thursday must be the first Thursday or must not. If we stuck with the first Thursday in June, the issue is, is Andy going to be available or not? And I wish I had an answer to that, but I don't right now. Clearly we can still, we can self-govern and move forward. But in the interest of him, finishing out the project that he proposed and that sort of thing, it is nice to have him here.
Well, I was just kind of wondering if some Moving Matters has money to keep him coming.
We have a contract with him that was for 5 meetings, so he will be here for at least one more meeting. We're not spending that money without receiving a product. And I don't know beyond that. I think this was all a shot in the dark. We're just sort of figuring it out as we go, and I don't see that we're at a stopping point, but ultimately you all get to decide that when you RSVP.
Emailing from you and Mara has worked well, so maybe just keep us informed on what you know, and maybe we can pencil in that first Thursday of June and go from there.
Is there a problem for anyone that you know of right now with the second Thursday?
There may be a problem with you if you want to do the shift only.
There might be some conflicts with committee members.
Okay. Well, we'll send out like one of those email web things where you say what date you're available or not. But as of now, I'd say either the 5th or the 12th of June. And you know, that may be the last meeting, at least in this phase of our work. I would like Andy to be able to bring us this document that he's been working on that reflects all the process and also what we've sort of created and come up with, so that the group can actually respond to that in a gathered setting. But we'll see. We'll see where he's at.
One thing is, this roof is available on the 5th, but it's not on the 12th. So
That's right.
If we wanted to do a different location.
That's right. So if we do go with the 12th, we'll find a different space.
And there was also conversation on in the original beginning, we talked about doing different locations, that makes that here, but that could be, I don't know, maybe you want to discuss the possibility of it. We thought about going to Grand Portage, and doing different things.
Okay, well, I'm not hearing a lot of feedback, so so it's, to me, that means you're leaving it to us.
Keep us on track and.
Yeah, Grand Portage, we can no problem with that.
Do that. Bruce drive further.
We're easy.
Walk.
We just do what we're told.
Okay, well, we'll be in touch about, let's just say the next meeting will be in Grand Portage unless you hear otherwise.
Perfect.
If that's all right.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. You take some food on your